Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde.
Hello, everyone.
The special summer summit. I want to thank you all for taking the time to tune in. And I hope that each of you is keeping well and staying safe. I'll be honest, this is not how I thought we'd be connecting this summer. If you know me, you'll know that talking to a computer screen isn't my preferred method of communication. Like so many of you, I was looking forward to being in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, for our Canadian Council. A chance for us to meet and debate the issues that matter to working people. A chance for us to reflect on the past 12 months, reflect on our struggles and celebrate our victories. The video we just watched was incredible, wasn't it? I think it's a powerful snapshot of what we've been through as an organization these past 12 months. And it's been a lot. But that video only captures a fraction of what we've done. And there's so much we still need to do. Our councils are a chance for us to look forward and map out the year ahead. They drive our union, they strengthen our democracy, and they fuel the movement for workers' rights and social justice. But like so many of the plans we all thought we had this year, everything's changed. I'd say we are living in extraordinary times, but believe me, that's an understatement. Never in my wildest dreams could I imagine delivering a speech This is a tough time for us all. I never thought. Anyway. Look, never in my wildest dreams could I imagine delivering a speech to our members through a video feed during a pandemic. A pandemic that has changed how we interact with each other, how we participate in community life, and even how we embrace our loved ones. We've had to adapt to this new reality. We've had no choice. For many of us, adapting hasn't been easy. For some, it's been downright scary. I think of the millions of workers thrown out of work as our economy went into a lockdown. 3 million workers laid off between the months of March and April alone. Many still haven't returned. In Unifor, we saw membership losses of more than 1/3, with workers laid off or on leave. Other workers kept their jobs, but lost significant numbers of hours. Canada's unemployment rate skyrocketed from historic lows to historic highs in a matter of weeks. And despite a rebound these past months, our unemployment is still in the double digits. The threat of a second wave outbreak in Canada, similar to Australia, South Korea, and Greece, is very real. We have to stay vigilant. We shouldn't follow the lead of the United States or India or Brazil, who seem to have missed the memo in the first place. This whole situation was and is simply unbelievable, and it is affecting some of us worse than others. If you look back in time, I will argue you'll be hard-pressed to find an economic recession triggered, not by markets, but by government policy. But that's what we are dealing with today. The forced shutdown of businesses, the closing of borders, the restricting of travel, all as a result of strict public health orders. And for good reason. Containing this virus earlier on was priority number one. For all of the 120,000 cases we've experienced in Canada so far, and the 9,000 deaths, more than 80% of them were residents of long-term care homes, which is so heart-wrenching. This crisis could have been a heck of a lot worse. Early projections forecasted Canada's death toll in the hundreds of thousands if nothing was done. I just can't even wrap my head around that. We needed decisive action from government, guided by the best evidence of public health experts. How Canada responded to the public health aspects of this crisis, while a bit of a slow off the mark, wasn't the problem. The problem was our social and economic systems. Many of them fell apart right when we needed them most. Our income supports, our social programs, our long-term care health system, all failed due to years of cutbacks and neglect. And let's not forget that. When the crisis broke, our service industries took the biggest hit. Passenger travel slowed substantially in our roadways and in our seaways. Air travel almost entirely grounded to a halt. Hotels closed their doors. Schools shut down. Taxis and limo fares dried up. Casinos, restaurants, and non-essential retail shops all temporarily shuttered, with workers fighting to keep hold of their benefits. Armored car guards weren't moving cash because cash was being discouraged. Even in the media sector, fewer ad buys meant even less revenue. At a time when we need the news media more than ever, they are working on shoestring budgets while Facebook and Google eat their ad revenue lunch. In fact, this was one of the few times in history that we saw an economic downturn led by the service sector. And the consequences were damaging. Some of these first-hit workers are the lowest paid and most precarious in the economy. Servers, cleaners, clerks, so-called gig workers. Very few have unions to help them deal with the boss and navigate the crisis. Most earn pathetic wages, often no higher than minimum wage. Very few have saved up rainy day funds to help them through this period. Hardly any have health and prescription drug benefits. Many can't afford to pay their rent, let alone childcare. And to top it off, barely any of them qualify for unemployment insurance benefits. Just about 1/4 of low-wage workers can access SEI. What the heck is going on here? We screamed and yelled about poor quality, precarious jobs for years, and nobody's done a bloody thing. Governments have allowed employers to manipulate our jobs to the point where standards have bent and frayed so badly, there's barely any stability and security left. And then a crisis hits, and they don't know what to do. The creation of the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit was as much about income stability as it was about the government acknowledging the rot in our job market. Lockdowns eventually took a toll on the manufacturing sector as factories closed to prevent further outbreaks. And I'm so proud of the work of our union has done, developing safety protocols, advocating on behalf of our members to ensure safety, to ensure workers not only are safe, but feel safe. We've done one heck of a job. These lockdowns took a toll on key sectors, including the auto sector. We witnessed a continent-wide shutdown of the entire supply chain for nearly 2 straight months, which is unprecedented. The downstream effects of the crisis also gripped our oil and gas sector. It affected thousands of our members from the offshore rigs in Newfoundland to the oil fields in Fort McMurray. And the situation is bad. Product demand is falling, and so are prices. We face major questions on how to sustain critical operations for the near term. I know there are those in the country who think we should just leave the oil and gas industry for dead. Not a chance. Of course, we have to be more aggressive in developing a renewable energy system, but that takes time. And in that time, oil and gas workers have a strategic role to play in moving us forward. Our members need to know they have our full support. Of course, I'm focusing on the economic pain points, and there are a lot of workplaces struggling right now that will need time and government assistance to recover. But there are others in Unifor who had a different experience in this crisis. Healthcare workers, essential service workers, emergency support workers. These folks saw their workload skyrockets. These folks, whether they liked it or not, were stationed on the front lines of this pandemic. Telecommunication workers, personal support workers, supermarket workers, food processing workers, public transit workers, warehouse and logistic workers, and I think of our members at DHL, who just months ago ratified a solid agreement with a company raking in big profits during the crisis. These folks, these heroes, literally put their health and safety on the line for the greater good. Talk about heroic. Talk about selfless. I'm so glad over the next days we'll be hearing from some of these folks on a special panel talking about their experiences. But here's the thing. These workers did nothing different these past months than what they always do. They show up for work. They help people. They care for people. Never considered heroes. Employers, for the most part, that couldn't give a crap. Governments that never cared. They're paid substandard wages, barely above the cost of living. They're hired as part-time so employers can keep costs down. Many of these workers are workers of color, newcomers, women, young people, all groups that are historically treated as second class, lower pay, fewer benefits, disposable. Boy, we fought like heck to raise the profile of these workers and the challenges they face. We demanded government step in to provide higher pay and then pushed employers to make it permanent. Other unions thought best to stay silent. They thought giving pandemic pay to workers was a bad idea because it set expectations too high. You know what? That's exactly the point, because expectations should be high. It's about building momentum to make lasting changes to work standards. That can only happen if we push the boundaries of what's acceptable for workers. That's how Unifor was built. I'll tell you, I've never been prouder of our union, our leadership team, our local unions, our activists than during these past months. It's like the old saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And did we ever get going in our response to these challenges? We are a very large organization, 315,000 members. But when the crisis hit, we shifted on a dime, recalibrated our services to members. We went into emergency response mode. We developed extensive resource materials in research, legals, pensions, health and safety, and education. We had our communications department hopping. We upped our game on online meetings and workshops, a resource we will continue into the future. We closely monitor the situations in our workplaces through our staff reps, keeping tabs on layoffs, virus transmissions, and a host of other matters. We were in constant dialogue with government officials, pushing them to introduce useful programs and forcing them to tighten up programs that were failing. In some cases, we were extremely effective on pandemic pay, on expanded wage subsidies, on extensions to CERB payments, especially for seasonal workers, on fixing EI. Look, I can walk right through it. We have our fingerprints on all of this because that's what we do. Were we successful in every case? No. I will tell you, there wasn't a week that passed that I didn't give an earful to someone in the finance ministry or the prime minister's office about CERB. The fact that union members couldn't access supplemental unemployment payments, for instance, was a complete error on the part of this government. Stopping employers from paying workers additional money to top up CERB checks doesn't make a stitch of sense. It is as ridiculous and stubborn a move as I've ever seen. And believe me, they're going to wear this. I'm not at all surprised by the cabinet shuffle. Morneau is gone as finance minister, and Chrystia Freeland is stepping in, and that's a good thing. I have a lot of personal respect for Chrystia, and I think she'll do a fine job. She's a bright spot in a government that's making several mistakes these days. But nonetheless, this was about fighting for our members. This was about making sure that if no one else, our members knew we had their back. And that's not something we deliver through my office or the national office or the regional offices. It's a mindset that runs straight through our local unions to the shop floor. And I want to thank you all, each and every one of you, for the hard work you put in and continue to put in for our members. Without you all, none of this is possible. Now, it's funny how the country works when we are all faced with a crisis. I find that there is this brief moment when politics are put aside. Ideologies are forgotten, we work together in common cause. I even found myself on a power panel singing Kumbaya with Dan Kelly, the head of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, a group we frequently disagree with because we both agreed Morneau's 10% business subsidy sucked and frankly needed fixing. I had Goldie Hyder, head of the Business Council of Canada, calling me looking for help. I even had Doug Ford back off on plans to cut mandatory stat holidays for retail workers. He recognized he had enough fights with our union. He didn't need to pick another one, and I'm really pleased about that, Doug. But here's the thing about singing Kumbaya. It's not that long of a song. And now that it's over, the politics in this country are settling right back in. We've got conservatives all across the country whipped up in a frenzy because they think everyone's stealing CERB money. Give me strength. As we speak, nearly $400 billion in Canadian corporate assets are tied up in 12 known tax havens around the world. Tax loopholes are sucking tens of billions of dollars out of our federal budget every year. But does that burn the Tories? No. What burns the Tories is that, God forbid, a low-wage worker accidentally scores an extra $500 on a CERB check. Money that'll eventually get recouped by Canada Revenue Agency at the end of the year anyway. It blows my mind. You know, over the next week, the federal Conservatives will pick a new leader to replace Andrew Scheer. And to be honest, not many people are really paying attention. With major challenges facing the country even before COVID, between the climate crisis and rampant inequality, the Conservative Party offers very little. This is a leadership race fueled by who can cut government programs the fastest, who can drain the Treasury faster with tax cuts, who can do the absolute least to address climate change and get away with it, who can build the deepest wedges between workers. Peter MacKay, one of the front-runner candidates, said he had changed course from Andrew Scheer's social conservative values in March in the Pride Parade. I'd say that was encouraging, except that a little while later, a video leaked showing MacKay as a total hypocrite. In the video, he's explaining to social conservatives that they'll have to park the issue of LGBTQ rights for now because it won't win them the election. Peter, what a joke. Then we have the other front-running candidate, Aaron O'Toole, the big tough guy who jumped into the race saying publicly he'd be Jerry Dias's worst nightmare. My worst nightmare? When I first read that, listen, I laughed. Then I had to remind myself who he was. Believe me, when it comes to my nightmares, this guy wouldn't even register in my top 1,000. But we will follow this leadership race closely, just like we follow all of the politics in our country. Because it matters. Workers don't live in a vacuum. Politics matter to us. And we should engage in political discussions, just like every other group in this country does. It's part of our charter rights. And it's not just about attacking the Conservative Party. They're just the ones who seem to pick fights with us the most. Look at Nova Scotia. Stephen McNeil, Liberal Premier, theoretically. I think he's one of my least favorite politicians, although he may be tied with Scott Moe and Brian Pallister. Not only did Premier McNeil sit by and let our northern pulp mill die, which I will never forgive him for, but now his government is preventing our laid-off members from getting severance pay. If you can believe it, the employer, which essentially has no money, is finding creative ways of financing their obligations to our members. That's great. But the province says no. They say no to worker severance, but yes to retention bonuses for managers. That's the ultimate sucker punch if I've ever seen one. That's why we continue to fight like hell for these workers, pulling out all the stops, because that's what we do. We get active in the politics of our country because politics absolutely matter. And that's why I'm so enraged at what's happening in Alberta. Jason Kenney, the guy who has thrown his support behind Aaron O'Toole for the Tory leadership race. Big surprise. 2 peas in a pod. Jason Kenney made it his mission when elected to attack the fundamental rights of workers. He's already tabled legislation that attempts to undermine basic democratic rights. And just weeks ago, Kenney tabled and passed Bill 32. That is the bill that introduces for the first time U.S.-style anti-union laws that try to keep unions out of politics. Not business groups, not the CFIB, not Kenny's friends, no, just us. He's framed the bill as a matter of workers' choice. Yeah, right. Union members will choose whether or not they pay dues for political activities. What that means is anybody's guess. What he intends to do is saddle local unions in Alberta with extraordinary rules. He wants to have us buried in financial paperwork. He wants to choke off funds and tie up resources so we can't do the work our members need doing. Boy, you know, Jason Kenney must think he's so clever, finishing the work he and Harper started at the federal level. When introducing the bill, Kenney's labor minister, Jason Copping, even referenced Unifor and our secondary pickets during the co-op refinery dispute. As justification for the bill, he said, and I quote, "We will not stand for unions such as Unifor, campaigning against the interest of Albertans in our core sectors using money of hard-working people who they represent in those very sectors without their explicit approval." I got two words for you, Mr. Copping. Buckle up, because this fight is just getting started. And if Kenney thinks we're going to play by these ridiculous rules, well, he doesn't know us very well. It ain't going to happen. At our last convention, we committed to making this a priority fight of our union. And that's exactly what we are going to do. End of story. This fight will be a cornerstone campaign for Unifor over the coming 12 months. And I can assure you all of that. In fact, the next 12 months, I'll say, might be the most critical for the labor movement in modern history. That includes a full dance card on political action. Next month, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe will call an election, and let me tell you, Unifor is all in. Premier Moe not only prolonged our biggest job action at co-op, he is a direct threat to over 6,000 Unifor members who work for the province's crowns. Remember this. Scott Moe has never been elected as premier. He took over the Saskatchewan Party through a leadership race, and I think the good people of Saskatchewan are going to test him in this election. We'll be gearing up for the recently announced election in New Brunswick. It also looks likely we're going to have an election in BC this fall, and we'll be ready for that too. And we are watching carefully what is happening in Newfoundland and Labrador with their minority government. Rest assured, COVID or not, Unifor will play ball in these elections in the only way we know how, and that is full steam ahead. The political ground is shifting, and the dialogue is changing. We are having conversations today that we haven't had in generations about expanding the role of government in key industries, about nationalizing key sectors like long-term care, about living wages, about better income security and improving EI, about rebuilding our manufacturing capacity right here in Canada. Look, this crisis is far from over, and the prospect of a second wave hitting Canada is very troubling. Believe me, no one has lost sight of that. But what this country looks like on the other end of this terrible period is hopeful and inspiring. During this summit, we'll be hearing from a panel of members about our newly released Roadmap for Economic Recovery. It was released this past summer and generated many conversations. In it, we lay out the blueprint for what a progressive, inclusive recovery needs to look like. And it feels like everything is on the table. Everything is up for grabs. We have to get ahead of this conversation to steer this country in a better direction. And that includes our work on equity issues and racial justice. What an extraordinary time we are living in. We are witnessing the next most important phase of the civil rights movement, including through I Don't Know More and Black Lives Matter. There is a reckoning taking place, and the momentum feels much different than in recent past. That's because there can be no more silence, not from anyone. The overrepresentation of Black and Indigenous people dying at the hands of police is a shame in our economy. It's a shame in our country, and Unifor will speak out. It'll speak out loudly just as we did on Emancipation Day on August 1st, and just as we will keep doing. We have a wonderful panel on racial justice during this summer, and I hope you will all participate. Because we have to use our collective voices to make change. Because going back to the way things were is not an option. I think of the opportunities these shifting narratives will have at our bargaining tables too. We've officially kicked off bargaining in the auto sector across Ontario, and there's a lot at stake for 17,000 members at the Detroit 3. We need investment now. We need to make gains for members, but we also need to plant the seeds for the long-term revival of the industry. That means securing work for future electric vehicles. We need governments to step up to the plate and play an active role. We are in the process of launching talks at Bell, Expert Tech, and Craft from some 6,000 members, which will be a critical round of talks for us in the telecommunications sector. We're also getting ready to open up talks for nearly 4,000 workers at Nova Scotia's long-term care homes and hospitals, including at Northwood. As you saw in the video earlier, the site of one of the worst coronavirus outbreaks we experienced in Unifor. 53 residents died. Nearly 100 of our members testing positive. I promise you we will continue having some very serious conversations with these employers, and that includes on working conditions and wages. And I'll extend that promise to long-term care workers in Ontario too. Nothing has been done to address the problems in a system that was in crisis well before the pandemic. Our work promoting the Care Not Profits campaign won't end until we fix this once and for all. And I look forward to pushing the boundaries on that, because our members in healthcare deserve it. We are dealing with major safety issues facing thousands of school bus drivers in our union as classes restart for our kids next month. We also continue to prep for a major round of school board bargaining in Alberta. As you can imagine, health and safety and a safe return to work is on everyone's mind. But this bargaining also comes on the heels of major education cutbacks announced by Jason Kenney alongside his attack on workers. This will be a big deal for us. Trust me, and I can't wait to get at it. In retail, our members are right now reviewing a tentative settlement on Loblaw stores in Newfoundland, a deal that breaks new ground on the protection and creation of full-time jobs. This is critical in an industry that is dominated by part-time work. This was a difficult round. Let's make no mistake. And our members still might turn it down. Our members are angry, and I don't blame them. Loblaw turns out major profits, then nickel and dimes of frontline workers. And that will set the table for our next major round of grocery bargaining at Food Basics in Ontario. I'm so proud of our supermarket members for the work they do and for their determination to win good jobs. We are also wrapped up negotiations at 9 of our 11 Rio Tinto units in Quebec, and we got in at the right time. As long as that lunatic is the president of the United States, we'll be fighting trade wars. Hopefully he's not there for much longer. But these latest aluminum tariffs have got to go. And we will work every angle we can to fight them off. Look, I can go on and on, believe me. I was told I had 15 minutes to talk, and I'm sure I've blown well past that. Look, I said 15 minutes is impossible. Our union is just too big, too active. There's just too much ground to cover. And I know, frankly, all I've done here is scratch the surface. But I want you all to know we see you. We see the work you are doing. We see the hours you are putting in for our members. We see your struggles, and we are here with you. Look, we're going to get through this period together, and we'll be a stronger union, a stronger nation on the other side. I know this because I believe in this union. I believe in the work we are doing. I believe in us. I believe in our solidarity, because there's no greater power on earth. Stay safe, my friends, and thanks for joining us. I miss you all so very much. Our summer summit continues for the next 3 days. Our Workers with Disability Forum begins shortly on Zoom for registered members. Also, please join Catha Forte and a panel of frontline workers live on Facebook coming up at 2:30 Eastern Time. And keep your comments coming. We see you on Facebook, and we appreciate you sharing your solidarity and support. Thanks for joining us all today, and remember, listen, I miss you all. Thank you.